The term data controller comes with a whole host of obligations. Being able to understand this concept is going to assist when answering questions. Hello, welcome back to Privacy Professional Training. It's Fumi speaking. Today's video, we're going to be talking about key terms you should understand in depth before taking the CIPP exam. So for anybody that's new here, the CIPP stands for Certified Information Privacy Professional for Europe. It is a privacy certification that is offered by the IAPP, which is the International Association of Privacy Professionals. Here at Privacy Professional Training, we provide insights for students that are looking to take exams that I myself personally have taken as a privacy professional. Without further ado, here are the key concepts that I feel should be known in depth prior to taking the exam. The first one is anonymous data. Now, the understanding of anonymous data is very unique in Europe in that it is information that does not identify an individual. So the insight that an individual who is not in the privacy space might understand to be anonymous data may not truly be anonymous data. And in the European Union, there's a distinction between pseudonymous data and anonymous data. And it's a really key concept that privacy professionals should know prior to taking the exam in the event there are questions that come up about anonymous data. I'll give you an example of what constitutes anonymous data. Anonymous data would be aggregated data. For example, 60% of 18 to 30-year-olds in the United States have an iPhone 15. That would be anonymous data because it doesn't identify a specific individual. So make a good distinction whenever you see an identifier, whether it's anonymous data, personal data, or pseudonymous data. And in the European Union, pseudonymous data still constitutes personal data. So really understanding the identifiers that you see is going to help you to make that distinction. Another key term that you're going to need to know for the European privacy exam is technical and organizational security measures. Under the data protection laws in the European Union, it's a requirement for organizations to have technical and organizational security measures in order to safeguard personal data. Now, those technical measures and organizational measures could include things like encrypting data when it's at rest or in transit. It could be having policy documentation related to which individuals have access to personal data. It could include having single sign-on and ensuring that each user is authenticated prior to accessing applications with personal data within them. But ultimately, the data protection laws in Europe require those technical and organizational measures. And when you're working as a privacy professional, once you've passed the CIPP exam, you're going to need to be able to let your clients know or let organizations you work at know that it's important for them to safeguard data. It's not just important for them to process personal data in accordance with these principles like collection limitation, purpose limitation, etc. There also needs to be safeguards when it comes to the assets that hold or the repositories that safeguard the data, putting in place those steps to safeguard the information from a technical and organizational standpoint. Another terminology that CIPP students should be familiar with is binding corporate rules. Binding corporate rules are a safeguard under the European Union Data Protection Law, also known as the GDPR, that facilitates the transfer of personal data from the European Union to what is considered a third country. Now, this is unique in Europe in that the United States doesn't have binding corporate rules per se. It's not a requirement under data protection laws in the United States, but it is in Europe. And this is particularly of note for organizations that do business in the European Union and in the United States. So it's one of the safeguards that has been highlighted by the GDPR in order to safeguard or facilitate cross-border data transfers. And what that essentially means is anytime personal data is transferred from the European Union to what is considered a third country, there has to be a safeguard in place, one of which is the binding corporate rules. And essentially what it dictates for organizations is it requires companies to demonstrate that they meet the same level of protection for personal data in the third country where the data is going to be transferred to. So it's basically organizations compelled to demonstrate that the obligations the company has in the European Union, that standard related to personal data, is going to be met in the third country. For example, the United States is considered a third country. So organizations that rely on the binding corporate rules have to demonstrate that the obligations they have under the data protection laws in Europe are also going to be met in the third country, for example, the United States. This is a very key concept to be able to understand, in addition to the other transfer mechanisms that are required under the GDPR to include standard contractual clauses, adequacy decisions, etc. So really understanding these transfer mechanisms and safeguards is going to be really important for your understanding and taking the CIPP exam. The next concept I want to talk about as it pertains to the CIPP exam is choice. Now, choice is the idea that consent must be freely given and that individuals have the opportunity to give their consent as it pertains to their personal data. So what does this mean in practice? It means that organizations should really present individuals the opportunity to choose whether their data is provided to an organization or a controller. So for example, whenever you see those email marketing forms on a website, you should be given the opportunity to provide your email address or name, and you should be clearly cognizant of what it includes whenever an organization obtains your information for email marketing. So you having the choice to enter your email address as opposed to an organization just buying the data from a data broker and then sending you emails, that would invalidate the choice concept because you haven't chosen to receive emails from an organization. They have bought your data from a data broker and then decided to then subsequently send you emails. Filling in that email marketing form on their website indicates that it is okay and you have a choice in the matter as to whether you receive those email communications or not. Another key concept that I think is crucial for the CIPP exam is the concept of a data controller. Now, a data controller is an entity who alone or jointly determines the means and purpose of processing personal data. Now, this definition is a very Eurocentric definition in that when we look at the types of activities that organizations choose to do when it comes to personal data, if an organization determines the means of purposing, and the means could be using a marketing form on their website, it could be having an application that collects personal data, that would be the means. And then the purpose would be the email marketing. They have a means of collecting the information, which is the marketing form on their website. And then they have a purpose, which is to conduct email marketing. In this specific instance, a controller would be the person that puts the email marketing form on the website and also conducts the email communications going forward. That would fulfill the definition of the means and purpose of processing personal information. The term data controller comes with a whole host of obligations. Being able to understand this concept is going to assist when answering questions that look at who is responsible for the data and what obligations are associated with processing personal information. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for resources associated with taking the CIPP exam, take a look at my description below and I'll see you in another video.